Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Greendale. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky, and inside the Thompson household, everything seemed peaceful. But beneath the calm exterior, a storm was brewing one that would tear apart everything the family thought they knew about love, trust, and loyalty. Eva Thompson sat at the dinner table, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Only a few hours ago, her world had been turned upside down by a single phone call, and now, sitting in the cozy dining room with her two stepchildren, Jack and Lily, she felt a strange sense of dread looming over her. Eva had been married to Jack and Lily's father, David, for 5 years. When she first came into their lives, she had been the picture of the loving stepmother. She tried hard to win their affection, doing everything she could to make them feel comfortable with her. At first, it was difficult. Jack, the older of the two, was a teenager with a wall of resistance built up against any form of authority. Lily, though younger, was shy and withdrawn, uncertain about her place in this new family dynamic, but over time things had settled into a routine. Eva and David's marriage had been solid, and though Jack and Lily still struggled with their feelings about their biological mother, who had left when they were young, they had come to accept Eva as a fixture in their lives. Everything seemed fine until tonight. It all started with a mysterious phone call. Eva had returned home early from her part-time job as a bookstore manager, hoping to surprise David, but instead of the familiar sound of her husband's voice. Greeting her at the door, she found him pacing in the living room, his face pale. In his hand was a piece of paper. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw something in his gaze, something that looked like guilt. "What's wrong, David?" Eva had asked, her voice trembling. He didn't respond at first, instead handing her the paper. The words were blurry at first, but as she focused, they became clear. A DNA test proving that David was not Jack and Lily's biological father. Eva felt her stomach drop. The air seemed to leave the room, and her heart raced as her mind tried to process what she had just read. David's voice broke the silence. "I found out today," he said quietly. "A private investigator did the testing. The kids, they're not mine. They never were." Ava's head spun. She couldn't fathom what David was saying. Jack and Lily had always been his children, even if their biological mother had abandoned them years ago. They were his kids, his responsibility. How could this be true? But as the reality began to sink in, Ava's shock was replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal. The DNA test didn't lie, and David's secret something he had kept from her for years had shattered the trust they had built. Her thoughts immediately turned to their marriage. How could he not tell her the truth? Had he known all along? But as David explained, it became clear that he hadn't known. David had thought he was their biological father until recently, when a lawyer's office had sent him the test results. Ava's heart ached for him, but it was hard to ignore the sharp sting of betrayal. She'd always trusted him, and now she felt the ground beneath her shift. But the truth about the children wasn't the only secret David was keeping. Eva soon learned that there was something far darker lurking beneath the surface. Days passed in a haze. Eva tried to process the new reality, but every time she looked at Jack or Lily, a new set of questions arose. Was she really their stepmother? What had their mother done to abandon them? And why had David kept the truth from her? Then came the discovery that would forever change everything. One evening, after a long day at work, Eva decided to check her husband's phone. She'd never done it before. Trust had always been the foundation of their relationship. But now, with all the secrets unraveling, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. What she found on his phone made her heart stop. There, buried deep within old messages, was an affair. David had been having an affair with none other than their next-door neighbor, Claire. Ava's mind reeled as she read through the messages, each one a painful reminder of how little she truly knew about her husband's life. The affair had been ongoing for months, and the messages were filled with longing, passion, and promises of a life together away from the chaos of their families. Ava's hands shook as she put the phone down. Her head was spinning, and her breath quickened as she realized the full extent of the lies she had been living. Not only had David been hiding the truth about his relationship with the children, but he had also been hiding a far more painful secret: the betrayal of their marriage. It was a crushing blow. The woman who had once been Ava's friend and confidant, Claire, had been the one to drive the wedge between them, both emotionally and physically. Claire's betrayal was one thing, but David's deceitful actions cut deeper than she could have ever imagined. In the days that followed, Ava confronted David. She couldn't keep living in a lie. The weight of his secrets was too heavy for her to bear any longer. David tried to explain himself, to offer excuses and apologies, but Ava wasn't sure she could ever forgive him. The damage had already been done. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about the trust that had been shattered, about the years of lies that had left her feeling as though she had been walking blindfolded through her marriage. And now, as if the situation weren't complicated enough, the children, the ones she had grown to love as her own, were caught in the middle of this web of deceit. Ava's emotions were torn. Jack and Lily, despite the discovery of the paternity test, still saw David as their father. They still turned to him for comfort, love, and support. But Ava knew she could never look at him the same way again. How could she trust him after everything he had kept hidden from her? The day Ava made her decision was one she would never forget. It was a crisp autumn morning when she told David it was over. The affair, the lies, the paternity test, it had all pushed her to the edge. She couldn't stay in a marriage built on deception. She couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. David tried to hold on to her, begging for another chance, but Ava knew it was too late. She'd been tied together by force, by the pressure of years of lies, by the weight of secrets she couldn't ignore, and in the end, it wasn't just her marriage that had been broken. It was her belief in love and trust, and in the family she'd worked so hard to build. Jack and Lily were devastated when they learned the truth. They felt betrayed by both their father and their stepmother, caught in the fallout of decisions they couldn't control. The family, once so close, was torn apart by secrets that could no longer be hidden, and so Ava walked away. The love she had once felt for David, the family she had worked so hard to create, was now a distant memory. The consequences of infidelity had changed everything, and there was no going back. The weeks that followed were a blur of difficult conversations, quiet nights, and emotional turbulence. Ava moved into a small apartment just outside Greendale, away from the life she once shared with David. Her heart ached at the thought of leaving the home they had built together. The memories of laughter around the dinner table, the quiet evenings spent watching TV, the summer vacations they had taken, all of it was gone. The life she had known for 5 years felt like a distant dream, slipping further away with each passing day. Ava's mind often wandered back to the children, Jack and Lily. They were her family too, even if she wasn't their biological mother. Over the years, she had become a constant presence in their lives, and despite the challenges, she had genuinely grown to love them. But now, with the truth about their paternity revealed and the scandal surrounding their father's affair, everything felt shattered beyond repair. Jack, ever the rebellious teenager, was struggling with his identity. He had always felt different from the other kids at school. His past weighed heavily on him, and the idea that David wasn't his real father only deepened his sense of alienation. But it wasn't just about that revelation. It was the betrayal, the sense of having his entire world pulled out from under him. He had trusted David with everything: his childhood, his hopes for the future, his family, and now it seemed that all of it was a lie. Jack spent most of his time in his room, barely acknowledging Ava when she called to check on him. His anger wasn't just directed at his father, it was at everything that had fallen apart. He couldn't understand why David had kept the truth from him all these years. Worse, he couldn't understand how the man who had raised him could betray him so profoundly by cheating on Ava with Claire. Jack had always considered Ava his only stable parent, the one who had been there for him even when things seemed impossible. Now he didn't know who to turn to. Lily, on the other hand, was struggling in her own quiet way. She was only 12, and her world had been rocked in ways she could hardly comprehend. She missed the idea of her family being whole, of having a father who truly loved her. But more than that, she longed for the connection she had once had with Eva, the woman who had shown her how to love unconditionally, how to trust and care for others. Since the discovery, Lily hadn't spoken much to Eva. It wasn't anger that kept her silent, it was confusion. How could she trust anyone again when the people she thought she could depend on had let her down so thoroughly? Eva missed them both dearly. She longed to wrap her arms around them, to tell them everything would be okay. But she knew that the damage caused by their father's affair and the broken promises couldn't be easily fixed. Time would have to heal the wounds, but how long would that take? Could they ever see her as the mother figure she had always strived to be for them? Ava's decision to leave David was final, but it wasn't easy. It had never been about the house, the money, or the lifestyle. It had been about the trust that David had betrayed. Still, she couldn't escape the overwhelming sadness. Of it all, she had loved him. She had believed in their relationship. She had built a life alongside him, only to have it crumble in the wake of deceit. One particularly cold evening, Ava sat alone in her apartment, staring at the window as the wind howled outside. She heard a knock on the door, but when she opened it, she wasn't expecting to see Jack standing there, his face a mix of frustration and sadness. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. Ava's heart clenched. She had missed him more than she could express. She stepped aside, allowing him in, and they sat on the couch together. The silence between them felt heavy, but Jack broke it, his voice filled with raw emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about everything? I thought you were the one person I could trust." Eva felt the sting of his words. She had always tried to protect them from the darkness in David's world. But now the truth was out, and Jack's anger was palpable. He was a boy who had been lied to for years, and that anger was directed squarely at her. "I didn't know." "Jack," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know about the paternity test, and I didn't know about his affair until everything came crashing down. I was just as blindsided as you were, but I'm sorry. I should have been more honest with you. I should have known that you would have questions, that you would feel betrayed too. I should have been there for you." Jack's eyes softened for a moment, but the pain was still there. He didn't speak, but Eva could see the turmoil inside him, the battle between the person he wanted to be and the one he had been forced to become. "I don't know what to do with all of this," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I'm angry at him for lying to us. I'm angry at you for leaving. But I also don't know how to make sense of it all. I don't know who I am anymore." Ava's heart broke for him. She wanted to fix everything, to tell him that it would all be okay eventually, but she knew that wasn't true. The pieces of their family had been scattered, and it wasn't something that could be easily put back together. In the weeks that followed, David's affair with Claire became public knowledge. The small town of Greendale buzzed with gossip, and the whispers about the Thompsons' broken family spread quickly. David became the subject of harsh judgment from their neighbors, and Eva, though not directly at fault, couldn't help but feel the weight of the town's eyes on her. She had become a symbol of a broken marriage, a woman whose life had fallen apart due to someone else's mistakes. David tried to apologize, but Eva couldn't bring herself to hear him out. There were too many lies, too much pain. She had made the difficult decision to step away from their marriage, but it didn't make her feel better. It simply felt like the right thing to do. Claire, the woman who had been at the center of the storm, tried to reach out as well. She sent Eva a message, asking to meet for coffee and explain herself, but Eva refused. She didn't need Claire's explanations. There was no way to make sense of what had happened. Claire was just as guilty in this mess as David. Months passed, and though Eva had walked away from David and his lies, She still found herself haunted by the family she had tried to build. Jack and Lily were distant, and those she still loved. Them deeply, they had withdrawn into their own pain. They couldn't understand her decision, and maybe they never would. But Eva had to learn to live with her choices, to find peace in the knowledge that she had done the right thing. Even if it hadn't been the easy thing in the end, Eva knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The bonds she had once shared with David and his children were irreparably broken. But as she sat in her apartment, watching the seasons change outside, she felt a strange sense of relief. She had been tied to them by force, by the pressure of lies, secrets, and betrayals. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt free to rebuild her life, free to heal, and maybe, just maybe, free to find the kind of love and trust she deserved, one that wasn't built on deception. As the months went by, Eva began to reclaim the parts of herself that had been lost in the chaos of her marriage. The anger, the heartbreak, the sense of betrayal, it was all still there. But she was learning how to live with it, how to let it go. She had begun to rebuild, to find joy in the small things again. Her job at the bookstore gave her a sense of purpose, and the quiet evenings at home, alone with a good book or a glass of wine, were slowly becoming something she looked forward to. But one night, just as she was starting to feel some sense of stability, everything changed. It was a Friday evening. Eva had just finished a late shift at the bookstore and was settling into her apartment. She made herself a cup of tea and curled up on the couch, preparing to unwind with her favorite show. As the steam from her tea rose in the dim light of the apartment, she heard a knock at the door. It was unexpected. She hadn't been expecting anyone. When she opened the door, there stood David. Her heart skipped a beat, though she couldn't decide whether it was out of anger or something else. David had changed since their separation. He looked worn, troubled, but there was something about the way he stood there, with his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and desire. That unsettled her. "Eva," he said, his voice hushed but firm. "Can we talk?" She paused, glancing at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Everything in her had been telling her to slam the door in his face and walk away. But a part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was still drawn to him, still. Tethered to the man she once loved, against her better judgment, she stepped aside and let him in. The moment he crossed the threshold, a heavy silence fell over the room. The space between them was thick with unspoken words, emotions, and a tension that neither of them knew how to address. Eva tried to keep her distance, but the pull between them was undeniable. David shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair. "I owe you more than just an apology, Eva," he said quietly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been a fool. I've made mistakes that I can never take back. But I want to make things right. I need to make things right." Eva felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted to scream at him, to remind him of all the ways he had betrayed her. But the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. There was something raw, something vulnerable in his expression. Something that reminded her of the man she had once fallen in love with. "You think you can just waltz back into my life after everything you've done?" she said, her voice a mix of anger and longing. "You think I'll just forget about the affair, the lies, the way you... I don't expect you to forgive me," he interrupted, stepping closer. "I don't expect you to forget, but I want you to know that I've never stopped loving you, Eva. I've made mistakes, but I'm not the same person I was. And I'm asking you, if you can, to give me a chance to prove it." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The tension between them was almost electric, and Eva could feel her body responding to his presence, to the weight of his touch. As he reached out and gently cupped her face, she pulled back slightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "David, I don't know if I can trust you again, after everything." But her resistance was fading. Her mind was telling her to walk away, to stay strong, but her body was betraying her. She could feel the heat rising between them, the magnetism she had never quite been able to escape. David's hand slipped down to her waist, pulling her closer. I'm not asking for trust right now, he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I'm still the man you once wanted, the man you once loved. Ava's breath hitched as she felt the warmth of his body against hers, the way his hands gently traced the curve of her back. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to scream at him for all the ways he had hurt her. But in that moment, all she could feel was the magnetic pull of his touch, the way his lips hovered just above hers, the heat that swirled between them. Before she could stop herself, she kissed him. It was slow at first, hesitant, as if both of them were unsure whether this was the right thing to do. But then the kiss deepened, and the world outside of that moment seemed to vanish. There was nothing left but the way his lips moved against hers, the way his hands roamed with a desperate need. It wasn't just passion. It was something more primal, something that neither of them could deny. Eva pulled back, breathless. David! But he silenced her with another kiss, this one more intense, more urgent. There was no going back now. The fire that had been burning between them for months, even before their marriage ended, had reignited in that moment. Everything else faded away, the past, the hurt, the lies. It was as if they were the only two people in the world. They had been torn apart by betrayal, but here they were, caught in the heat of a longing neither of them could escape. Ava didn't know what would come next, whether this would lead to more pain or some sort of healing, but for the first time in months, she didn't care. In that moment, she was alive, caught in this storm of desire, of unresolved feelings, of everything that had once been and everything that could be again. For once, she let herself feel it all.